afternoon. Still in the panel 7, local agency and state structure in post-conflict societies. And in order to save the time and in order not to make long pronunciation of names, the presenter each at the beginning, please introduce yourself and then speak up.
All right, well, I guess I'm the first person with the unpronounceable name. My name is Kurt Bessiner. I'm from the University of St. Andrews. Also, most of my career in the region right now has been through my incarnation as a co-founder of the Democratization Policy Council, a think tank that's based in Berlin. And what I wanted to do today was to try to test drive an idea on you, honestly. I don't have conclusions, so you don't need to stare at the screen. There will be nothing projected there that I have put there. My presentation looks at shocks to the system, common adversity in countries. And what gave me this idea was living in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the 2014 floods. Just to give you a bit of context of when that happened and how that happened. As Damir mentioned in his presentation earlier, there were a series of demonstrations in Bosnia and Herzegovina beginning in early February 2014 that were manifest predominantly but not exclusively in Bosniak inhabited parts of the country. They were followed by a movement called the Plenum Movement, which was really sort of a loosely structured series of gatherings where people expressed their discontent with lack of political accountability. There were many manifestations to that, but that was sort of the common thread. That kind of petered out because they were scrupulously apolitical. They didn't want to have a political manifestation to this and develop a political vehicle for it. So while it had a lot of commonality throughout the country in terms of the expressed discontent, it didn't, they wanted to avoid dealing with politics. And so that ran out of gas just in time, 3 months later, for a series of floods that affected about a third of the territory of the country and actually a greater portion of the population throughout all the river systems in Bosnia, through a series of long, protracted periods of heavy rainfall. And what these floods demonstrated in rapid succession to this popular mobilization was a complete diagnostic exam on Bosnian governance. It demonstrated from top to bottom, almost everything failed. State, the two entities, the Republika Srpska Federation, the cantonal authorities. There were only two elements of the public sector that came out with any degree of credibility, and even then it was varied. And those were the army, which had been on a starvation diet since birth because the government of Republika Srpska had been trying to starve to death of funding, and some municipalities. And at the municipal level, that was probably because mayors in Bosnia and Herzegovina are directly elected, and people knew who to blame. They knew where to go. They knew where the mayor lived, and they probably knew him or her, mostly him. Beyond that, though, and more importantly, communities helped each other out, helped themselves out, but also helped across ethnic lines. And the most famous example, what sort of sparked this idea to discuss with you today, was an incident on the Bosna River basin. There's a town called Doboj. It's in Republika Srpska, and it got hit very hard, including the center of town. The first assistance to Doboj did not come from the RS authorities, Republika Srpska authorities. It actually came from the town of Teshan, next door in the Federation, which is majority Bosniak. The mayor of Doboj, Mayor Petrovic, quite logically thanked the people of Teshan and the authorities of Teshan for sending water and food. And he was immediately pilloried by the then president of Republika Srpska, now Serb member of the Bosnian presidency, for basically getting out of his ethnic lane. How dare you thank Wozniaks for helping your citizens? And it became a campaign trope. He was attacked because there were local elections that October. So 5 months later, and he became a focus of political venom, saying, you see, here's the guy, you know, he actually accepts a pro-Bosnian orientation. You know, we can't have mayors like that. He got reelected, which tells you something. But it was a demonstration of a few things. One, the network that was built up during the plenums of these groups throughout Bosnia and Herzegovina that had worked together and expressed a lot of common frustration with the lack of accountability in governance. Actually, the plenum's finest hour happened after almost they were politically dead as a political force, because what they were was a social network that developed to assist in the humanitarian dimension. And they actually did a lot more to assist fellow citizens across ethnic barriers and across communities than the government did. The governments, I should say, plural. And so that made me think, is this something that you can see manifest in other situations? Was that unique? And taking advantage of the fact of our Japanese hosts, brought us together, the immediate thought said, well, wait, you know, after the Fukushima tsunami, earthquake, and you have your state structure couldn't be more different between Bosnia and Japan. You have a highly centralized, efficient state where, you know, you have a direct connection between the center and local authorities, and yet there was still a lot of frustration and lack of response, and communities still had to fend for themselves. And there was variation across the spectrum in terms of response, but communities really did have to come together for each other, and both within those communities and among them. Despite a state that should have been able to handle this in theory, and tsunamis are not unknown in Japan. So what I wanted to do is try to tease out where those commonalities might be between those two cases and pose a series of questions for either future research and discussion today. I think that one element of the shock to the system, it exposes the fissures, frailties of the system that were already there. They don't need to just simply be natural disasters. They could be political shocks. They could be exogenous shocks of other types. But in both these cases, I would say that underlying long-standing problems of governance and accountability were exposed. And the most granular level of social trust, circle of social trust, was municipal, probably even coming back to Oliveira's presentation earlier today, sub-municipal even. Below the actual wider municipality level in Bosnia, went down to what they call the Mjesna Islands. And that's where this community assistance was organized. And there's a tie-in for the relational studies element of this. I think one of the wider themes that we're all that's sort of infected, it's sort of been the elephant in the room that we haven't discussed frontally yet, but I expect my colleagues on the panel are going to be addressing it as well, is the wider global phenomenon that has become much more clear since 2016, and that is a sense of crisis in representative democracy. And failures of trust in systems, in theory, where you have representation and clear mechanics for that. But in actuality, there's a sense that it's not working. And I don't think I think that's a universal theme, but I don't think it has a clear singular diagnosis. But where you do have diminishing trust in democratic institutions, the lack of clear mechanics for representation and accountability and exacting it, and knowing who to blame when things fail, knowing whom to petition when you need assistance, and having them feel responsible to you is I think that this is something that is a wider miasma that sort of that is affecting a far wider pool of countries and societies than I think is commonly realized. I'll tell you why, in one sense, being an American right now also affects this. Bosnia-Herzegovina, I thought I was coming up with some sort of, at best, a boutique sort of knowledge that wouldn't be transferable, living there for 11 years, working in policy analysis and advocacy. I now feel sometimes that American politics and Western politics more broadly are as Balkan, if not more Balkan, than the politics in the Balkans. I call Donald Trump our first Balkan president, and I mean that advisedly. I mean, it is a bag of tools that you do see represented, division for political effect, generation of fear, patronage, if approaching the coal industry, a dying industry by any definition, well before the 2016 campaign, is not an active, preemptive patronage before he even got into office. I don't know what it is. So I think that there are elements that need to be brought forward. There's a sense that citizens at the local level, and we have a system that in theory should represent these interests. You know who your congresswoman or man is. In a lot of proportional representation, there's nobody who's responsible for you. The party theoretically is, but as we see in Britain, even with a territorial district system, they're not actually. They're responsible to the party, not to their constituents. So the common theme that I've put together, and I'm going to close in just a moment. Resilience is a term that's become a buzzword in the past 5 years, at least in my experience. And it means different things to different people, but it puts, certainly in a disaster context, it's a sense that you could withstand an exogenous shock, and you could return to a status quo ante, or as is commonly heard in disaster scenarios, you could build back better because you have some social fabric that can withstand that blow and help you recover from it. I think that's where we are in the democratic world right now. We're seeing the failure, and we're facing a challenge of whether we could build back better, or in the Balkan context, build from the ground up. Effectively, we have forms of democracy, but we don't have actually souls of democracy or a sense of democratic accountability at all. And so you have a facade without the reality. You don't even have a muscle memory of democracy in this part of the world, whereas we do. We feel a sense of loss of that sort of accountability. So what I would like to close with is to really ask you to give me reflections on whether you think there is anything in this thematic that is the basic granular building block of representation in democratic societies, however you want to define democracy. Yes, I see 3. I'm going to make it. Whether you believe that this might be some common theme on a much wider level in these 2 cases, whether you believe, those of you Japanese, whether you believe I'm onto something or just blowing smoke, and how you've seen this over the past 8.5 years, almost 9, since the earthquake. Does this have any systemic aftershocks in democracy? Has it changed anything in the way things are practiced? Because in Bosnia, I can guarantee you it hasn't changed anything in the way government is practiced, but you have seen a gradual level escalation in civic self-confidence. And so I'll close with one final observation from that case, because as a parallel of building back better, you also have, try, fail, try again, fail better. In Ukraine, we saw this with a series of protests. The promise of the Orange Revolution, the accomplishment of the Orange Revolution, the failure of the Orange Revolution to change that system and actually functionally make it accountable, and then you had a rapid relapse 9 years later. In Bosnia, the protests that started in Srpska, the Justice for David protests, traversed a barrier that we hadn't seen before, and it's yet to be seen whether it will be reconstituted under the new government world. You had a moral leader, you had solidarity protests, you had a traffic jam of 23 kilometers of people coming from the Bosniak Majority Federation to go to Banja Luka to join a protest led by a Bosnian Serb army veteran over his son who was murdered under still unclear circumstances, and a government that was seen to be covering it up. That was a new barrier that was traversed. So I think there's a lot of potential in these societies for change that has been manifested in these small snapshot shots, but they haven't ultimately led to systemic change. And I wanted to see whether from those building blocks we could go from micro level all the way up to actually changing governmental systems, and that knock-on effect more broadly as a demonstration elsewhere in our global society. So I'll leave that there. I'm sorry, it's not conclusions, it's more questions, but I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Very
Okay, thank you. So, as heard, I will also present myself. First, name and address from the University of Belgrade. And first of all, thanks to Kiric and Professor Sakai for inviting me. It's very nice to have this opportunity to share some thoughts. Although this is kind of very early draft, so it will be kind of sketchy, but still, it's a nice opportunity to present some of the work that I do. I just want to have one remark, because I'm doing mostly peace building and state building work, but my kind of approach is very critical, often post-colonial, so I'm guessing that the argumentation from time to time would be very different than what we heard so far, but bear with me, there is some sense in it, at least I hope so. So the title is Romanticize or Not Romanticize the Local, and it's about kind of peace building in the Balkans. That is kind of the work that I'm also focusing at the moment. And I think this is very kind of up to date, because I think General made 2 good decisions. One being quitting Trump administration, second having this phrase. Regardless, I do have presentation, although it's very brief, just a couple of slides. But I hope it will be kind of enough to show kind of details on the work we're going to do. So, general, I'm kind of interested very much in the liberal peace building. I'm sure that Soren and Krista will touch upon that at least briefly, but what I want to just say briefly, that it's kind of the dominant form of the peace building that we had since the Cold War, which is kind of obvious, and I don't want to go into too much details, but it was kind of prevailing form of peace building, and still is, right, in many parts of the region, starting from our region, which is one of the earliest ones. Some of my colleagues actually participated in a way, giving efforts, but it kind of spread around the world, and at some point it seems that it's kind of the only viable option. That's why I was aiming at Daniel asking that question, right? And I really like this answer by McGatty that says that kind of the liberalism became as a magic dust, that if you spread around states, it will produce harmony and prosperity. And it's very interesting in this kind of notion that you actually see peace as a governance, so that you can actually build peace, right? In that sense, peace building is often state building. By creating a state building in a way, in a kind of certain blueprint, you will kind of have a peace in a region, at least in this kind of interpretation. And these are kind of key pillars, right? I would say state structure, free market, legitimacy. But the idea is actually that you can actually build peace, right? And it had some kind of successes, there also had some failures, but it has been academically heavily criticized for this kind of notion. And I think the 3 main points of critiques, I think at least for me, are the following. First one would be kind of that liberal peace building is often made by several interventions. I mean, our region would be probably the best case, but others as well. Most of the peace building efforts are actually done via some form of interaction, be not necessarily military, but some kind of interaction. The second would be kind of the ill results. And I'm actually not referring to the Balkans here because I think we have a rather successful story in that sense. I think we kind of agree on that. I think there are much worst case scenarios in that sense. And the first would be the work that I'm actually doing, this kind of civilizatory, is that the word? Civilizatory, yeah? Nature.
Civilization.
Okay, civilizatory nature of these kind of efforts. You know, like, there is, it's often this kind of radical critique saying this is kind of imperial type of, rather people would say this is white man burden, right? We are here to show you how to be more peaceful, right? And this is something that resonates a lot when it comes to local populations. You don't need always someone from outside to show you how to be more peaceful or less peaceful in that sense. And kind of blow back to this has been a kind of the whole area of peace studies, something called the local turn. And I think it's a kind of, we already touched upon that to a certain extent, it's kind of a paradigm shift, the school would say, going from top down to bottom up, right? Going to grassroots approach. And of course it has been a theory for a long time ago, but I think it kind of entered also policy area. Kirk mentioned resilience, which is an excellent example. I think that for me, I don't quite get what resilience is, but everybody is using these kind of buzzwords, right? Local ownership, empowering, all this kind of stuff. But this is something that kind of critique had influence on policy making as well, that the kind of approach has to be at least kind of balanced, top down and bottom up, but preferably actually bottom up and, as they call it, problem-centric, people-centric, sorry for that. And it's interesting that in that kind of local term, local is often seen as a kind of problematic, right? Because we are, as you can know, sometimes corruptive, sometimes ethnocentric, particularistic, but usually in this kind of view, local is seen as a solution, right? We are empowering, there is an agency towards, it's very kind of resilient. It kind of has the possibility for kind of any substantial change that liberal peace building didn't have. In that sense, local is seen as a solution. And I think that I owe here a kind of a footnote that local is not, when you say local, not meaning that someone is bound to the territory of some small locality. It's actually something that is, I think this is appropriate for the conference. It's kind of very relational, right? It's kind of network. It has its own agency. It's kind of deterritorialized. So it's not really local when you talk about physical sense, but it's local when talking about this agency network that's in a local where peace building efforts are taking place. And there has been very interesting research on that. I actually put several that are interesting for me. There are research on the people who are constitute local, right? There are kind of social relations. There are also material artifacts, which is very interesting how locals actually change the purpose of the material effects that international agency and interventors bring. There's an interesting piece by Roger McGeety about 4x4, you know, these Toyota vehicles, that they are used with one purpose when they are brought to some region, but then locals completely misuse. For example, Islamic State is using it for resistance, right? Not of any kind of peace building. So there has been very, very interesting research on a local and various aspects. But there's always one big caveat, and always, whenever you read, there's always a caveat, and it says, do not romanticize the local. And that always kind of intrigued me. If local is so empowering, it has its agency, it has a solution, why not romanticize local? What's, you know, like, we never go this kind of theoretical consideration, but there is always this caveat, do not romanticize. And I can, because my work is mostly kind of connected with the Balkans, I decided to see what is actually local peace building and conflict resolution in the Balkans. What would that be if we truly want to follow this local term? What would be kind of local approach to that be? So my kind of research hope will be around Balkan approach to conflict resolution and peace building, to see what would be kind of traditional, someone would say indigenous, although in our context indigenous will probably not be the best word, but kind of traditional forms that exist here. And of course my work would probably be, or not probably, but it is kind of ethnographic inspired. I'm not doing ethnographic research for many reasons. I don't have skills, don't have time, I'm guessing for many reasons. My wife would never allow me to go somewhere for a year doing ethnographic research. So kind of, there are various reasons what to do, but I'm doing most ethnographic inspired research with a lot of storytelling, which is kind of peace studies now becoming very, very present. There is a lot of observation, doing kind of research, but this is kind of how I try to tackle this problem, or actually this research question. And so far, because it's kind of early idea, I came up with this. So this is very early. I was very creative calling it violent and non-violent, which is not a good description at all. But these are some of the conflict resolution with the mechanism that I kind of found in our region, meaning Balkans. So some of them have been tackled here. I think Miloš was saying about agonistic dialogue, which for me is interesting because we wrote a piece that actually, in our case, truth or facts do not really mean that much, or actually we perceive them differently, which is very interesting because when you talk with historians, they usually see that there is more or less objective interpretation of history, right? In our case of reconciliation, we kind of trying to challenge this idea that there is not. There is also culture of forgetfulness, which is very different from African culture, for example, where there's some research, but there is a culture of forgiveness, right? So talking so much about, for example, reconciliation, a lot of reconciliation in Africa is based on forgiveness. In Balkan, there is no forgiveness. I mean, our culture does not recognize that as any driver of reconciliation. We can maybe forget or we can retaliate. So this is what I think that liberal peace building has kind of neglected the cultural aspects of the societies where they're intervening because it's not really the same. This is kind of the incomplete list for Balkans, but if you go in Asia, Southeast Asia, Latin America, or Africa, this will look dramatically different. And you see some of them, some of these are actually, as I said, violent would be Blatfield, probably will be the most famous one. There is this interesting story about human trafficking or maybe even slavery, where Serbs actually exchanged 100 virgins for giving to Turks kind of to reconcile the problems that they had. So there have been numerous examples of what would be kind of traditional. I also put territory divisions in this kind of latest type of Brussels dialogue. When someone asks me about that, I think this is a very traditional way of dealing with problems in the Balkans. So if you insist on local, that will be kind of in line with what we do, right? So territory division, ethnic division, that will be kind of, if you're really actually advocating for the local turn in that sense. And these are some of the others that you see there. Some of those actually names in Serbian, so those who know actually know what is a code of honor, especially present in Montenegro. Brotherhood in faith, which is very interesting, talking about honors, talking about religion, which is kind of very important, there is brotherhood. So all these kind of mechanisms there. And hopefully there will be much more as my research progress. And doing this kind of preliminary research is actually bringing me to the main question, is actually what do we want here in the Balkans, right? Do we want this magic dust, as Roger was saying, or we want magic wands? Is it that we want really liberal peace building or Balkan peace building? Because if we're criticizing liberal peace building, we're saying we should go more local, then all these aspects should be accounted, right? Both positive and negative, because this is something that is kind of, for our region, it's very characteristic, right? In that sense, it's very questionable whether we want liberal peace building or what they call Balkan peace building. Or maybe we want something in between, right? In that sense, something that they call in the literature hybridity. And I hope, or now I'm just kind of having a hunch that this kind of research will lead me to the kind of conclusion that actually liberal peace building, its success or the failures depend on the context. It's not really about universality of the principle or the institutions of the markets, actually the context of the region where they are applying. So in the case of the Balkan, I think it was rather successful because I think that we are inclining more to the liberal values here than, for example, going somewhere in Africa, for example, Rwanda or Congo, where there have been different speaking efforts. So in that sense, I think it's actually the context in the region that defines the success or the failures of the liberal region. And this will be kind of the strength and weakness of the locals. So if this is kind of empowering, this will be kind of prevail in any form of peace building. But it's not that a liberal peace building prevail. It's on one hand, we have a liberal peace building which is kind of universal, and on the other, we have local, which is very, very diverse. So in that case, I don't think we can make a judge that liberal peace building, as it is now, it's a successful failure. I think this is kind of case by case or region by region kind of conclusion that really depends on the local and on the context that exists there. That's all. Thank you very much.
I'm a rebel.
Oh, yeah.
Right, I'm going to stand because, not according to regulations, I'm going to totally mess up the camera because I'm going to stand here so you can't see me. Right, I'm going to talk about Bosnia and I want to tell you how I came to think about it, right? Those of you who know some of my work, I've done a lot of work on Bosnia, right? And whenever I travel to Bosnia, I think, wow, it's such a dysfunctional state, right? If only Bosnia could be like Switzerland. Right? And then a few years ago I started traveling to Iraq. And I'm like, oh my God, how wonderful Bosnia is compared to Iraq. Right? If only Iraq could be like Bosnia. Right? And then 2 years ago I was invited to do some work for the Syrian opposition. Right? And so I started doing a lot of research on Syria. And I was like, oh my God, that's even worse. If only Syria could at least be like Iraq, right? So you kind of get this level of state failure and kind of violence within the state that make you think about state building, right? They make you think about what is it with states, with state functionality, with violence, right? Why do we have states that are in complete disarray, that are de facto failed states, right? Syria would be a failed state. Why do we have states that function a little bit, but not properly? Probably Bosnia would fit that category, right? Why do we have Switzerland? Right? Why does Switzerland function? What makes Switzerland so efficient? And I'm just choosing Switzerland here because, good chocolate, it's very rich, good knives, good cheese, what would you want? So this made me go back to, the research I've done on Bosnia. And it made me think about, so what do we know about state building on Bosnia? And this reminded me a little bit of Donald Rumsfeld. Do you remember him? He was Secretary of Defense at some point, and after the 9/11 attacks he gave a very famous speech. Okay? The known, unknown speech. Right? And in reference to terrorism and how to prevent it, he said, well, there are some known knowns, so facts that we know them. Then there are some known unknowns, so facts that we know that we don't know them. And then there are unknown unknowns, so facts that we don't know them. Okay? And I found myself thinking about state building the same way. Right? When we look at state building, there are things we know. We know things that are a good idea. Right? Like, for example, when you intervene in a conflict situation, right? Peace, the creation of peace is the most important thing. Right? That's not really surprising, but that's pretty much something we know. Right? The importance of security in the first month after an intervention and at the beginning of state. Right? Then there are also known unknowns, things that we know that we don't know them. So, for example, we're still not fully sure why Germany and Japan became democratic, but Bosnia 20 years afterwards did. Right? We can talk about it. I mean, Daniel in the back would say it's all to do with power sharing. But then I would say again, but Switzerland works, right? Belgium works. Power sharing can work, right? So these are the known unknowns. And then, of course, there's a whole list of unknown unknowns. Okay, there's the things that we don't know that we don't know them. Okay? And surprisingly, I don't know them either. So what I started to do is I started with the known knowns, right? I started with the things we know about state building in Bosnia. And we know what worked and what didn't work. And that's not as easy as it sounds, right? Many people have written lots of funky books about this, right? Including me, so please buy them. It's nearly Christmas. I too have a family to feed, right? So we know state building in Bosnia happened in different phases. Okay, so first phase was about 2000, we can discuss today, right? Here the focus really was security, right? Heavy-handed approach by NATO, very much trying to separate the armies, right? Trying to do a basic level of reconstruction so you could move around in the country, right? Then we have the so-called state building phase, right? Some people say it starts earlier, 1997, right? After the Bonn summit of the Peace Implementation Council. Let's say with 1999, 2000, really the OHR starts heavily intervening, right? And that goes until about 2006, right? Paddy Ashton leaves and they bring in a German. That was a bad idea in the first place. Right? And after that, we call it European member state building. And when I say we, I mean I. Okay? So this idea that the EU, as Kurt has said, the EU takes over, right? And what we're seeing now is a move away from simple post-war reconstruction to a period of preparing Bosnia for EU membership. Right? So that we know. We know there are different actors involved. We know they use different instruments. We can discuss all of this in detail. These things are not something where, those of you who work on Bosnia, nobody's going to go, wow, this guy is brilliant. Right? We know there were different priorities. At the beginning, the priority was peace. That's not surprising. The country has been at war for 3.5 years. Right? Then the focus was on state functionality, on democracy, and then the switch came to preparing the country for EU membership. We know there were different strategies, particularly pre and post 2006, right? The question of how much should international actors intervene, right? But also the different NATO and EU strategies, which are quite interesting if you compare them. Okay? And then in more recent years, last, let's say, 7 or 8 years, we are seeing a divergence also between the US interest and European interest. Right? That was something that, people would say, until 2006 this worked because there was a convergence of interest. And since we see a divergence, that might be one of the reasons to explain what goes. And we have different outcomes, right? I mean, state building is not simply like, is a state working or not? States are complex things. That's a really good academic term. States are complex things consisting of complex institutions, right? Complex policy areas, complex social relations, right? Making up a state is quite difficult. I mean, Max Weber made a living out of, describing what a state is, right? So, and I think when we look at Bosnia, this is again the problem I have with, the people that assess state building in Bosnia is, it's very easy to say, oh, it's failed, right? And in many areas I would agree with that, but not at all. I think there are, these pockets of success, which you mentioned, Kurt totally disagree with me when I say the Bosnian military, right? But despite of all the weaknesses that the military has, the fact that we have a united military, right, under civilian command, in a country that, 20 years ago went to war, right, had 3 militaries until 2006, is I think something where we can say here state building and external pressure has made a difference, right? Some of the rebuilding of the infrastructure we can mention, refugee return, right? There are some areas I think we need to be more detailed when we assess, did peace building work and didn't it? And that then led me to a number of conclusions about state building in Bosnia. I'm not going to go through all of them, right? But just a few most important ones, right? State building is multifaceted and complex. It's like the understatement of the year, right? So, you will be really surprised at internal and an external dimension to state building. Again, another understatement of the year. And state building changes over time. And what I have done here is I've taken a few book titles. Those of you who have, the literature on Bosnia, right? These are kind of book titles that people wrote, right? So you have first state building with a focus on peace building. This is kind of the Roberto Belloni literature, right? So state building as peace building. Then you of course have to bring David Chandler in at some point, right? State building in Bosnia, faking democracy, right? Then you have the people who write on EU member state building. Okay? Then you have, the Gagana Nuceva literature on failed conditionality, and then you have the work that Kurt's colleague Valerie Perry has done around Bosnia as a frozen conflict. Right? So I think sometimes book titles are nice to give us a reflection of what's actually going on and how can we assess it. So that made me think about what are the lessons we can learn, because academics love lessons to be learned. Right? First one is we need to think about international actors, right? International actors obviously matter, but the question here is between should and can, right? What should international actors do? This is where the liberal peace building comes from, right? And what can they do? Is it really a good idea to expect international actors to build democracy, right? Is that really how it should work? When democracy is defined by the rule of the people, right? The second thing is the role of the local actors. What do they want? We seem to have this idea that in all conflicts, in all post-war societies, the local actors really want democracy, they want peace, they want a functioning state, and surely the one lesson we can learn from Bosnia is this is not the case. Right? And then, of course, the role of timing and planning. What do you do? How? When? And by who? Right? Okay? So, have lessons been learned? So the first thing I did is I tried to move from Bosnia a little bit more regionally and look at the interventions in Macedonia and in Kosovo. Okay, these are quite interesting because you can look at things like timing of interventions. Right, much quicker intervention in Kosovo and even quicker in Macedonia. Right, Macedonia, many people say, if it wasn't for NATO and EU intervention, we would have had a civil war in Macedonia. Right, so here this idea of conflict preemption actually worked. Right? And even in Kosovo, the conflict was in full blow, but you know, the international community didn't wait 3.5 years. Right? And you can see that if you compare, for example, death rates in the conflict, right? How many people died. Okay? Then look at international involvement. That's quite interesting. The heavy involvement in Kosovo until today. The basically fading international involvement in Macedonia. Okay? The role of local elites, the role of long-term plans. Right? Kosovo very much also linked to UN negotiations, right? Which were then brought home through constitutional politics in Kosovo. In Macedonia, very interestingly, very early on, focused on constitutional politics. This needs to be a local solution that leads to constitutional changes, right? Which again is very different from the Dayton Agreement, right? An international agreement that includes Bosnia's constitution. And then, has there been a difference? Has there been different impacts? Right? What difference has it made? That's a question, again, that depends on the eye of the beholder. Right? People will look at Bosnia and Kosovo and say, well, they're both de facto failed states. Right? Or certainly on the brink of failed states. Right? And then people tend to be a bit more optimistic nowadays about Macedonia. Okay, but probably 18 months ago, people wouldn't have been that optimistic about Macedonia either. Okay? So that then made me think about the next step, which is going from the region to the global. Okay? Do you see how I fit in with the conference theme? This is brilliant, right? The first thing is, again, I'm really in contestation for the understatement of the year award today. State building is difficult. Now, I'm not saying this because this is a truism. I'm saying this because I think we assume that building functioning states sometimes is very easy. I really do, that there seems to be, especially amongst academics, right? Because academics, you know, especially those that work on theory, right? Don't necessarily know the practical implications. Okay? So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is we've learned international actors better. Right? That's important for security. I think here Iraq and Afghanistan. Then we learned that local elites matter, and very important, we learned that incentives matter. Right? Why did state building in Macedonia work between 2002 and 2005? Because the country had a clear EU integration perspective. Right? There was a clear promise, and they were en route to achieve it. Right? And only when this became further removed from them do we see the state building exercise becoming slowed down and also seeing negative. So what does that tell us about Bosnia? I thought I'd do the home run, right? Bring it home. Well, in Bosnia the lesson is the institutions have become comfortable for locals, for local elites. Right? It works for local elites. Why would you want the system to change? It's perfect for local elites. I mean, people like me, people like Daniel, people like Kurt look at it and say, how dysfunctional, right? If you're an MP in the parliament of Republika Srpska, you think this is brilliant, right? So why would you, or in the Bosnian parliament, and you're the one who has to change the system, right? Because you have the power to change the constitution. Why would you change something that works for you, right? The other thing we learned from Bosnia is the international community can make a difference, but they won't, right? We shouldn't underestimate the influence the international community still has, right? It just lacks the political will, okay, to do so. And there are numerous reasons which we can say. The other thing is, I think that, and that's true for Bosnia as much for all the other examples I mentioned, be it Macedonia, Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan. The problem is that when international actors intervene, right, the main thing they have in mind is A, to end the conflict, or B, in the case of Iraq and Afghanistan, to get rid of the old regime. They don't really have in mind what comes after that. Right? So this idea of what kind of state do we want after that, I think that vision, right, is very often lacking. And I would argue in Bosnia and Herzegovina today. There's nobody who has a clear vision of this is how Bosnia should look like. Right? And I put this nice point in here. Bosnia is just an example from state building to state failure. Right? I mean, that would be the biggest embarrassment for the international community. Right? The same could be said about Iraq. Right? I mean, I would bet a certain amount of money that in the next 30 years we will see another military intervention in Afghanistan, for example. That is pretty much a safe bet, as it sounds. Right? But these state-building exercises have failed for very precise reasons, and I think some of the factors I've mentioned here, and again, I have no aim to be complete here, but I think some of these factors really matter. And we need to think about that there are conflicts where internationals should intervene. That's the liberal in me, right? But how do we bring peace? How do we build peace afterwards? And that's it. This is a new book. Buy this book. It's Christmas. Right? You also make Jelena happy. So, it also makes a great gift. I mean, imagine your children, your mom, your dad opening their present, seeing that book, something they didn't expect. Thank you very much.
I'm here from the University of St Andrews in Scotland. My background is I was a police officer for a number of years, and then I did some work in Northern Ireland with a peace building organisation, which makes up a little bit of my research. I just want to start by expressing my gratitude for the opportunity to be here, so thank you very much for having me. I'm going to talk first my presentation is on the pressure from above and to do with an inadvertent collusion from the grassroots with elite interests in Northern Ireland, which hasn't really been mentioned today. I am going to talk first very briefly about the Northern Irish conflict because I wasn't sure how familiar people might be with it, and it's a little bit old-fashioned and unfashionable now to talk about Northern Ireland because there's certainly a perception that it's a peaceful nation, which I will disagree with. And then talk about the peace in inverted commas in Northern Ireland. Social capital is a way of understanding relational peace building, the role of NGOs in that, and then the challenge of peace building. I call it post-agreement because I don't like post-conflict because I think the conflict has continued. So very briefly, the Northern Irish conflict, there are a lot of similarities between the Northern Irish conflict and the conflict in the post-Yugoslav territory. So it lasted over 30 years, it's known as the Troubles. It's ethnic, but it was Christian on Christian, so I'm being very crude in my divisions, but it was a Protestant unionist group who wanted to remain part of Britain, and a Catholic nationalist group who wanted to become part of United Ireland. And these were the two main groups to the conflict. However, the British state also had a very prominent but secret role, and there were a lot of paramilitary dissident groups who were very active. As I put here, they were responsible for the majority of deaths in Ireland. And throughout the conflict, before, due to the partition of Ireland, and after, communities have remained very segregated. Then in April 1998, a peace agreement was reached. The peace agreement institutionalised power sharing, very similar to many other places in the world, and this imposed a mandatory coalition, meaning that the executive, to function, had to include both parties, so a unionist and a nationalist party working together. So in simple terms, this was a way of getting the parties to the conflict around the table to reach agreement. So, what has occurred is a system of semi-operational consociationalism. What I've put at the top here is one of my main arguments, but Soren very kindly introduced it, that the elite level interest is just to maintain the status quo. Nobody benefits at the top if the system is changed. So what we have is society just maintained in silos, all the way down from the top, and this trickles down so that space in terms of where people live with housing, but also where they socialise, the shops they use, the routes they walk, the public transport they use, is completely separate. And education in particular as well. The current figure for Northern Ireland is that 9% of education is integrated, the rest is separated on ethnic boundaries. And yeah, this works great. This just shows the level of segregation of housing in Belfast over the last 40 years. The blue is the Unionist Protestant community and the green is the Catholic. And as you can see in 2011, which is several years after the peace agreement, segregation is actually just as defined. So West Belfast is very much the territory of nationalists and East for Unionists. So the external perception of peace and certainly a reduction in the number of deaths and casualties has meant that funding to Northern Ireland has been reduced. And then, on top of that, last year in January, the Northern Irish government collapsed. And I think now they have the claim to fame that they're the territory without an operational government for the longest period in history. And as a result, I argue that the role and influence of elites in terms of peace building is diminished. However, this was the case already because there was no interest. And peace-building theory certainly prioritises a role for the elite. So things like Lederach, which has come up, and a lot of other multi-tier or multi-track diplomacy approaches to peace would give a specific role to the elites. Now, I argue that because that isn't present in Northern Ireland, we have to have a renewed peace-building focus at the level of the individual. And I've used a citation there that says the challenge for Northern Ireland is to foster an associational life that allows individuals to cross extant community barriers. So the way in which I understand relations is via social capital. The definition I've used is a kind of combination of the widely accepted theory on it, which is that social resources available to an individual as a result of their human networks. It's a social resource, it's non-economic and based on the presence of trust, reciprocal relationships, and the existence of networks. The two types of social capital that I use primarily, although I recognise there are others, is bridging and bonding social capital. So Kurt, I'm going to use you as my example for bridging. In that bridging capital is the type and extent of connectedness between members of different communities. So myself and Kurt, I'm Scottish, Kurt's from the States. We have very different ethnic and really very different backgrounds, but we have shared norms and values in terms of our education, and as a result, I've benefited via social capital by being at this conference, because it was via my connection to Kurt that I'm here today. Bonding social capital is people from the same community. So that might be myself and somebody from my village who has a very similar ethnic, religious, class background to myself. There's a very developed literature on bridging social capital and how this can be used to build relationships between opposing communities in conflict. So, during the conflict, the construction of bridging social capital was facilitated by NGOs. The most usual pattern in Northern Ireland by NGOs was to take groups from different communities, generally youth groups, but there were a lot of other types of work, women, mothers groups, some paramilitary work as well, where they brought groups from either side of the divide together. And during the 80s and 90s, in particular, European Union peace funding, so Peace 2, 3, and thereafter 4 was the name of the funding grants, and a lot of philanthropic grants meant that the construction of social capital in this way, it was facilitated by the international community. Funding was less prescriptive at this point, so it was very strings-free and it could be needs-based. In addition to that, it was not widely professionalised, so it was based on quite ad hoc practice and was largely based on volunteerism and things like this. So I've done semi-structured qualitative interviews in Northern Ireland over the last year with kind of gatekeepers, professionals in the NGO sector, and some service users. So this is a quote I've put up from a service user from the 80s, this was, and she spoke about how she hadn't met any Catholics until she was 17 years old, and then she went to Seed Group, which was a peace-building NGO in Northern Ireland. I've put in bold there. They watched a film about the conflict together, and it really touched her, and she said, I don't think we ever apologised to each other about what our side of the community had done to each other. There was just an understanding that, as two young women, we were both impacted by this story, and we weren't going to let it ruin our friendship. So the construction of bridging social capital there is quite apparent. And then in the literature as well, this is backed up. So Alfred McCreary still is a journalist in Belfast who's done a lot of work on this. And he talks about children who had attended Corrymeela, which is the NGO that I used to work for in the 70s, one of which, Jimmy, he went back to Belfast afterwards and asked if he could return to Corrymeela, but with the same mixed group of children. He said, at first I was a bit scared to go off, as I knew there might be fighting. I was told that you could get a good kicking from the other side, but we found out that the other boys were just like us and we liked them. And then if I did a little one down the bottom there, a young girl in the same group who said, she wrote a letter to Corrymeela and said, thank you, it really was a wonderful time. I changed my attitude to teachers and to Protestants. So without the predetermined outcomes and this strings-free funding during the kind of 80s and 90s period, peace building could be very experimental. I've just included a quote there from a facilitator who effectively says, without the need to get to a certain end point, peace building could be needs-based in order to transform relationships. So then, in the post-agreement period, as I've said, we've gone to Peace 4, which is the current, just coming to an end, period of funding from the European Union. And funding from the British government, which was a big stream, has tended more towards local authorities in Northern Ireland now. The funding that does come from Europe tends to have quite prescriptive programme outcomes, and there are fewer philanthropic grants as well. As a result, and connected to other legislation, professionalisation has to be prioritised. So this means the time dedicated by peace-building organisations to administration processes, governance, reporting, and adherence to legislation, things like child protection and data protection have become big business in Northern Ireland. And these have limited the capacity of NGOs to conduct effective peace-building work in terms of bridging social capital. So I'll just quickly talk about that. So the first is the challenge of prescriptive funding. So now what we see from Europe is funding grants coming in, but they have certain set outcomes that must be met in order for all of the funding to be received by an organisation. So some of the Peace Centre directors that I interviewed talked about the pressure of money now. One said, if you have a funder telling you, we know what's going to happen tomorrow, then are we surprised that nothing new happens? And somebody else said, when money starts to become the measure, then the quality of peace-building work is affected. Then the challenge of reduced funding has some separate problems. So we now see there's a lot of inexperienced staff. It's going back towards having more volunteers in an era of professionalisation, which is kind of mutually exclusive. Partnerships in terms of NGOs grouping together to work on thematic issues has been lost because partnerships are hard work to maintain, and also because there's a competition over funding. And there's been a lot of closures of peace-building organisations. So I haven't got up-to-date figures, but for the 3 years between 2007 and 10, there was a significant drop in the number of peace-building NGOs. The The challenges of professionalisation are also quite significant. So what we see is a lot of nepotism in order to meet the objectives, so the obligations of legislation and other policy practice. And these are all within NGOs that didn't really have that governance structure in the first place, because a lot of them sprung from social movements which were in relation to, or in response to, one of the kind of symptoms of the conflict. So what does this mean for social capital, especially bridging social capital? The NGO programme quality is effective, so we have a lot more volunteer-led programmes with an absence of experts. Attention is diverted to maintaining professional structures, so I spoke to a lot of practitioners who now are being paid £50–60 an hour, but 2 hours of their day is dedicated to reporting or administrative practice, where before they would have had the resources to avoid that. There's also competition and a race for funding. NGO span is effective, so the kind of span of work and breadth of work they could do before is curbed because of diminished partnerships. There are fewer people engaged for less time, and I just use one example to finish off here. We've talked a lot about education and the problems of segregated education. So this is a former Peace Centre director who worked in the 70s in Northern Ireland, and he talked in the 70s and 80s. They had teachers coming away for 4 or 5 days on residential, all working together, all from different schools, up to 60 teachers at a time, going through and learning together. And he says, the big thing that happened was in the early days, you got people released from schools for no cost. Now you have to pay £150 to £200 a day for a teacher to get out, and that's prohibitive for a charity. That's also another way in which the current administration, whether it realised it or not, ensure that people don't learn how to do new things. So, back to this graphic, this is the current situation. I'll just cut to this one. What we want here, this is the aim, which might be a little idealist, but we have free associations via bridging social capital at the bottom, and this, from the bottom up, creates a cross-cutting political support. Now, this isn't the reality at all. What we have is this, and I should really add arrows going back up the way, because of the inactivity and the poor quality of NGO work now, the third sector and the grassroots have inadvertently colluded with the interests of the elites to keep communities apart, which I've just summarised that. And what now? So I was looking for some input on potential policy solutions to this problem would be what I have to do. Thank you very much.
Since I have also been working on the state and also democratic political regime on Southeast Asia, I would like to ask a few questions to each of you, mostly from a theoretical point of view. First of all, CART, building community through common adversity. I understood your arguments on the impact of external shocks on the dynamics of the local popular solidarity, if I'm not mistaken. In Bosnia, actually there was a popular solidarity after the flooding that cuts across the ethnic lines. So I think there are at least three valuable things. Sorry, the first session after lunch is really dangerous. This is what's happening. Now, I think there are three valuables in your argument. One is external shocks. either it's natural disaster or something else. The second one is absence of effective government or lack of representative and accountable government. And the third one is solidarity or non-solidarity on the part of people. I think this is what has to be explained. Now, I want to ask questions to each of these values. First of all, external shocks. I think you contemplate on comparing Tohoku earthquake and Scorpion flooding. Are magnitude of disaster the same between these two cases? That in the Tohoku earthquake, more than 15,000 have been found dead, whereas I don't know about this Scorpion case. I think the magnitude of disaster can have varying impact on the popular response. So I think you need to be careful about it. And then second, absence of effective government. You were talking about effective government at one point, but on another point, you were talking about lack of representative and accountable government. These are two different things. Whether there is a government that can deliver goods and services, or whether there is a government that can listen to the people and can get those interests be represented in the decision making. In your opinion, which aspect of government more important? And the third variable, solidarity and non-solidarity. External shock leads to solidarity of people. It sounds really fascinating, but is it always the case? In some cases, the external shock may lead to resource scarcity, which may result in a competition for the scarce resources. So it might rather bring about the calamity, the division, conflict among people. I want to talk about my thought on the Tohoku earthquake, but I think I will be speaking more than 5 minutes. So that's it for you, right? And then next, to romanticize or not to romanticize the local. Your research is about the critical assessment of liberal state building program, and also the existing literature on the local driven state building. So you basically critically assess these existing literatures, and it tries to suggest an alternative state building model with this model. Again, it sounds very intriguing, but I have 3 questions. How would you argue that the Balkan model that you suggest works better than any of these different models? Second, the various groups in the Balkan region share the norms or the pattern of social relations. There was this slide that laid out the pattern of social relations, and then mindset, and etc. But do you think the various groups within the region really share the norm? 3, again, the question about the state. The hasty liberalization or hasty market reform, hasty democratization may hinder state building effort. This has been argued by the previous leaders like Roland Paris, Francis Fukuyama as well. Basically, Paris, for instance, has been talking about this state building by saying it's more important to build effective government than to democratize. So you are not the first one, I believe, to say that liberal democracy should not always be the priority. So how would you respond to the existing literature on the state building, which basically criticizes this piece in liberal democratization? Right. Now, during rethinking state building after conflict, there are so many questions posed in your slides. It's again very intriguing and thought-provoking. My first question is the criteria of state failure. You have been repeatedly saying that Bosnia is an example of state failure. But what constitutes state failure? Or what constitutes successful case of state building? Is it absence of violence, or is it the existence of responsive government that can deliver, or is it the existence of representative government? Just tell me the criteria of the state failure or success. And also the second one, the similar line. We have been saying that 20 years, there is no fully functional state in Bosnia. 20 years. I was thinking about the history of Japan. It was in the latter half of the 19th century that we first introduced modern state system. And then after that, we had to, it's only after the World War II that we had fully functional democratic state. So it took a really long time for us to finally have, let's say, fully functional state. Isn't 20 years too short for you to expect the Bosnians to have a fully functional state? Or if you put it another way, don't you think the state building project is a long-term project, and you might expect it to happen too hastily? And then finally, third question. You've been talking about state building. You have to enlighten me on this. If I'm not mistaken, state building as defined by Francis Fukuyama is basically about state apparatus. But state is not just a state, but it can be nation state as well. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, in Bosnia, the state building entails not just making functioning state apparatuses, but also making nation states. Do you think there is a subjectively, objectively, or intersubjectively shared understanding on who constitutes nation? Then finally, Kirsty, pressure from above. You basically talk about the function of social capital, especially the bridging type of social capital in a post-agreement society. And also you critically assess the NGO programs, the existing NGO programs, as well as the management of them. I have two questions. First of all, if I'm not mistaken, I understood you were arguing that the direct contact among the people is conducive to build a social capital or to enhance trust. Is it really always the case? Maybe there might be a possibility that the frequent direct contact may even lead to a conflict. Because there are many cases in the world where the neighbors were dealing with each other. So you might clarify the condition you might clarify the condition which enables those direct face-to-face contact, leads to building trust rather than otherwise. Then the second question is about consociational democracy. I think you basically criticized the elite-led reconciliation process, and that's why you focus on the grassroots trust-building process, which I think is really valid. But at the same time, elite-led consociational type reconciliation, I think, has some merit as well, because often the conflict is mobilized by elites. And if the elites are contented with the current system, there might not be a large-scale conflict. So in that sense, consociational model may not be too bad. So I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Do you want us to respond to the order? Okay. Sure. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Suzuki. Your questions are perceptive, and I'll try to address them. Certainly, I was not implying that the scale was of a team of two disasters was necessarily commensurate. What they did expose, though, in common, rather than not in terms of material damage and lasting material damage, was a failure in responsiveness in ostensibly democratic systems, right? And I thought that was the most important. That was the only commonality between the two, other than we had some sort of disaster that was natural. You're asking me to differentiate between the two aspects of governance shortcoming, between ability to deliver the services of good government and accountability. I see your point in disaggregating them, but there's a linkage. I mean, in the sense that if a government is not, if the citizen does not have the leverage with which to exact that accountability, there's more likely to be deliberate failure, I would argue. And I think that certainly was the case in Bosnia, and obviously I would question you. I would love to hear your response in the discussion, because you did have something you wanted to say about the earthquake in Somalia, and I would like you to enlighten me on that, what you thought that, or you and your colleagues, what you thought that exposed in the system, whether it did expose a problem in the system. I mean, the Japanese democracy is a very particular type, where you've had one party dominant pretty much throughout the democratic history of the country. So I certainly, from the consumer perspective of governance, the citizen as a consumer of democracy and then supposedly the beneficiary thereof, there was definitely a sense from my very narrow news consumer perspective, there was a lot of complaint about the response in a rich country. And finally, is it always the case that external shocks spark solidarity? No, but it's remarkable how often it happens. I would say, and you're an expert on Southeast Asia, and one of the other cases that came to mind that I followed in real time was Cyclone Nargis in Burma. There you had complete state complicity and lack of preparedness. I would even state very clearly that people were not warned over official radio that it was coming, because it might create panic, and that might create a problem for the general regime. And what came to the fore was self-started, bottom-up, citizen, local, small business assembly of response, far before the army, which is the biggest organized force in society. The state is built around the top of it all. So there is a common thread. Is it an absolute no? It's tendency. I think I would be comfortable in leaving it at that. And you could also see this in my own country in our response to the hurricanes in Puerto Rico, where there's no argument. There's an absolute failure of federal government response to that, and a lack of social solidarity through governance structures that was sort of counteracted through civil, non-governmental structures from throughout the rest of the United States. So those are my responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I think I'll be rather brief, but yeah, I think we didn't quite understood each other in that sense. Well, the kind of the critical thing here, the teacher is saying that we wrote these buildings should be criticized on many accounts. Some of them are listed there are many others that can't probably. But it favors kind of local approach or kind of grassroots approach to peace building, right? And then when you look at the local approach, in our case, in the case of Balkans, I'm not sure that this is kind of things that we should favor, right? Because it really depends. This is your one case, one region. That's why I have a feeling it would be very different in other regions. But if you see the mechanisms, traditional mechanisms that are grounded in the region, or what James Scott would probably call hidden transcripts there, I'm not sure that the local content is always necessary or desirable. And then it brings me towards the further question first. Maybe we should, as far as say local building, which scares me the most, and then agree with piracy. Like, next to the climate change, this is my biggest fear, that I actually agree with you on something. But it is something that we cannot talk in kind of general terms. Apparently there are some successful building in some areas, but it isn't also the local that is kind of omnipresent solution for everyone. It kind of has to be dependent on the region, on the context, on the people, on the kind of relations that you said. And I think in my case, kind of because when you say Balkans, you basically mean a former Yugoslavia, right? So I think someone mentioned there's this former Yugoslavia minus Slovenia plus Slovenia. I mean, it's simplified, but generally we do share the north because we were in the same country for like 8 decades, right? So in a sense, I think this wouldn't be a problem that be kind of unsolvable in that sense. I think there is a shared common norms that we do have in the region, right? But what brings me that local term is, as liberal peace building is not a solution, local term is also not a solution. The universal solution, as it kind of suggested by the criticism of the literature. Thank you.
Right, I keep it short, the biggest line of academia. Yeah, the question on state failure is an interesting question, right? When is a state a failed state, right? Many people would say Bosnia is on the brink of a failed state. What Kurt has talked about, the floods are a nice example of it, right? The state failing to, not just to prevent a natural disaster, which potentially could have, but also to react once it happens, right? But then if you compare Bosnia to, let's say, Yemen or Somalia, you would say it's so much more functional than these, failed states. So I think state failure is not something we need to look at as in, in absolute terms, a little bit like pregnancy, right? You either are pregnant or you're not. No kind of middle way. I think state failure is something much more on the slide, right? You have to look at it on the scale. You can be a state that's failing in some areas but not in others, right? And I think we shouldn't treat either you are functional or you're failed. And I don't think it's a binary choice. Okay, so I think we need to look at criteria. I mean, it's when you look at the impact of peace building and state building in Bosnia, that's a nice example to show how different perspectives change. And if you look at the perspective of security, right, and you say like, well, the main task of state building and the international involvement was to end the war and build a secure environment, you would probably hail Bosnia as a big success. You would say, actually, we have had peace. Nobody has died because of an ethnic conflict since 1995, right? And most likely, there won't be an ethnic conflict on a large scale. Might be localized skirmishes, but on a large scale, a return to 1992-93 fighting, unlikely. Not impossible, but certainly unlikely. Right? So I think, we need to look at it on a scale. But then, the same way, if you say the role of international involvement was to democratize the country, to build some form of functioning democracy and responsible government, then you would say, well, the international involvement failed, right? Because that's not been achieved. That's really scary. This little Dorik sitting there, ending. And just one word on it's light effect. It's like in a discotheque. Is 20 years enough? Of course, people would agree to say that state building is an ongoing thing, right? States continue to build, even the most established states that we have in Europe, North America, continue to build, right? Think about Canada's engagement with the Aboriginals, the new definition of American identity, what does the election of President Trump tell us about American state building and self-identification, right? So, of course, state building is an ongoing process. But then, where Bosnia is different is Bosnia is not Japan, Germany, or Italy in the 19th century, right? Bosnia doesn't have 100 years to consolidate its state. Bosnia operates within a globalized world, right? In which you can only really participate, benefit from if you are a reasonably functioning state, right? That would be the argument, okay? And the fact that Bosnia is not that, and the fact that, Bosnia, for example, international investment per capita outweighs the international investment in Germany after the Second World War, right? And yet, economically, where was Germany in the 1960s? Where is Bosnia today, right? Okay, we'll leave it there. We can talk about nation building
Thank you, Professor Stewart, for your comments. I agree with you on the first one to do with positive contact. So in my thesis, I talk about contact theory as well, which the main two elements that it would be based on in terms of Northern Irish relationships would be trust and equal status, and also shared space is a kind of localized concept there because space is so territorial. Quite often the interaction has to take place away from people's territory. But yeah, I didn't pull out the nuances of that in the presentation, but certainly Corrymeela, the NGO that I'm focusing on, would have a lot of examples of poor poor peace building practice where the contact was not positive. We did quite a lot in kind of around 2008 and 2009 with Israel and Palestinian groups that was catastrophic because a lot of it I think is to do with the ability of the facilitators to establish the trust and equal status, and if those elements aren't present, then yeah, there will be negative contact and therefore obviously no social capital built. The second point, and certainly I should perhaps have made this more clear as well, I'm not dismissing consociationalism. Without the power sharing system in Northern Ireland, there would be no peace agreement. I certainly think that. That was the only way to progress at that point in the late 90s. And I'm also not dismissing elite-led reconciliation, especially through modelling, which I fully agree is very valuable. The problem is it's absent in Northern Ireland, and actually more than absent, and I might be being a little provocative, I think that elite political and religious leaders proactively incite ethnic hatred, and it's very subtle. There's one very recently with an MP from the British government who wanted to change the name of a bus stop, and it was because the road name on the bus stop ascribed to one side of the community. She wants to change it to another. Now, there's no interest in doing this. It's like the road names somebody was speaking about yesterday. It's just a way to maintain division. So yes, consociationalism and elite-led peace building, very valuable. I just think in its absence, let's move the focus away, because otherwise we're stagnant and we're not moving in Northern Ireland. So that, basically I agree with both your points, but I just wanted to cover that. Thank you very much.
Probably we have still about 15 minutes and please
Okay, thank you. My question goes to Ted. Thank you for your presentation. I have been long interested in the impacts of natural disaster, and also its disaster affiliation efforts after disaster, on the impact on the domestic order and international order change. 5 years ago, I started a project on the natural disaster, on the impacts of the perception. So I have two empirical cases. One empirical case was China and Japan disaster diplomacy after Tohoku earthquake, which was, it is contrary to my assumption, and proved to be a failure. Not only it did not have to improve relations, both sides initially had its hope. They made great efforts, but the result was opposite. The relationship deteriorated because of this disaster cooperation. The second case is still ongoing. This case is on the cyclone of 2008 in Myanmar, which seems to be a successful case, which facilitated the domestic order transformation and also for international orders change, perception change for the elites, especially for the junta regime. 2 years later, the government became democratized, and its relationship with the international community also changed a lot. Of course, that one single happening did not facilitate all, but it really served as a catalyst for this kind of big transformation on both dimensions, international dimension and domestic dimension. So I'm very curious about, because I do not know the Bosnia's flood, first time for me to know this happening. Could you elaborate more on the details? What kind of concrete, specific impacts on the Bosnia government or its leaders' perception towards its domestic governance and also its foreign relations? Thank you.
As you know, I'm not a specialist in this. I had the feeling that you were all very enthusiastic enthusiastic and sounded, it looked as if you had, that was your plan. But at the same time, you all sounded very disillusioned. And I think Kirk was the one who brought up the mistrust. And somehow I thought it was echoing in every presentation. And I was wondering if you would like to elaborate, all four of you, what your perspective is on this growing mistrust. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Madam. Let me give you very provocative and challenging question to all of you. A simple question. Why do the post-conflict countries need full effective government? Well, actually, as I mentioned, why I'm studying on Iraq, and well, in Iraq, there is a government. There's the elected government, and they do the elections regularly, and they succeeded in kicking out, kicking the Islamic State out. Or they don't have army, but they have some kind of security forces. Then okay, but well, I never believed that there is the fully effective government there. And there's a big gap between the local society and the central authority. But still, I can say, still to some extent, it's working. And well, as I mentioned, there's the security forces after the which kicked the IS out, and they are not trained by the United States, but they are trained by the Iranians. So let regional power do that. Okay, and as for the local society, well, there's no, as I mentioned, there's no good relation between the local society and the central government. But well, as for the local society, well, the tribal groups are managing, and I don't think that the local people are satisfied with that. But still, there are somebody to take authority there, no matter whether you like it or not. So. Which kind of full effective government are needed there? So this is my very simple but question.
Okay, are there any more? Please,
Just respond to
please.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. So, mistrust. I think the mistrust in terms of Northern Ireland comes a lot from the conflict and what is being talked about today and yesterday on truth and the concept of truth during and after conflict. I think perhaps it's not very widely known, but the Northern Irish conflict and the British government and the police's role is very murky and secretive, and more comes out on it. Very recently there's been a number of inquiries looking at effectively non-legitimate murders of civilians by security forces or the police. And I think for certainly one community, which would be the nationalist community, that has really, really affected trust. But then there's this huge centre middle class contingent who are very embarrassed by their country. We call them the toffs for terrorism in Northern Ireland. Toffs means like posh people. And they all do their little bit with charity, and they don't really want to think about what their government or their police force were responsible for. But they certainly have no link with the Northern Irish executive either. So I think mistrust as well, trust is based on respect if you're talking about relationships, and the government doesn't respect its people there, they're not represented, and they're not served. Which kind of ties into the second question actually on whether there needs to be an effective and or fully functional government. Now, I think Northern Ireland is slightly different from the Western Balkans and other states, nation states we've been talking about, because it's sandwiched between Ireland and the UK, and the democratic traditions there are much stronger. And I think it's been a bit of an embarrassment actually with Brexit, what's happened to Northern Ireland, because it's just been forgotten about by the British government. For the last 20 years, there's been a low level of violence, nobody really cares because there's not mass killing anymore. In terms of democratic representation and being legitimate as a traditionally historical democratic nation, Northern Ireland doesn't have it. And I think that the fully functional effective government, it could be the UK government, it could be the Irish government, it doesn't necessarily have to be devolved. That was part of the peace agreement, but that's potentially defunct. Yes, they should have a government, whether they like it or not, I agree with that, but they don't have one at all. So Sinn Féin, who are the main party that represent the Catholic nationalist side, don't sit to the British government because they are opposed to that. So then the Northern Irish Executive is operational. That Catholic nationalist population have no political representation now, nothing. And so they are a land of chaos, sandwiched between two of the most historically democratic nations in Europe. So yeah, embarrassing. Is what I would say. To conclude my thoughts. Thank you very much. Great questions.
On the question of mistrust, you see, I don't know if the aim of post-war state building, democratization, or peace building should be necessarily to create trust. Right? Building trust is incredibly difficult. To follow up on what Perry said yesterday, you can only create conditions that might lead to some form of social trust building. And then, if you look at countries like Belgium, Spain, and the situation in Catalonia, right? We are talking about countries that would reasonably be considered as reasonably functioning liberal democracies, and even there, at a very low level of trust between different communities. So maybe the idea shouldn't necessarily be, oh, we need those groups to trust each other and hug each other and throw with flowers all the time. Maybe the idea should be that if you have a society where you have different ethnic, linguistic, religious, national, cultural conflicts, then the idea is, okay, these groups will have issues to trust each other, especially if in the past there have been forms of oppression by one group or the other. So we have to accept that there's a lack of trust. But how do we make sure that that lack of trust doesn't end in violence? And that, for me, is the interesting question, right? So it is okay that groups distrust each other, right? If my ethnic group has been suppressed for years and years and years, and discriminated, and maybe ethnically cleansed, and maybe forcefully removed into a remote area, I too wouldn't like the group who did that, right? So I'm not sure that necessarily the focus on trust here, but we need more trust building. I'm like, yes, that's not completely wrong, but what we need more importantly is a form of managed mistrust that doesn't lead to violence. And I think that's key. And again, it goes back to the point I tried to raise between what should the international community and what can the international community, right? And we might morally find it nice to say, wouldn't it be nice if everybody got on and, in Bosnia, they all speak the same language, they all share the same territories. It's like, yes, they also all killed each other, right? So let's not forget that, right? So, and the same is true for, we've talked about Myanmar, for example, Iraq, right? You can go like, oh yeah, I mean, they do all speak Arabic. I mean, even the Kurds, most of the Kurds in Iraq speak Arabic, right? So why can't they get on, right? Well, there are deep-rooted reasons for that. So the idea is not to transform the society, not everybody can be Switzerland. But if you get to a situation where at least these mistrusts are managed in the sense where people don't kill each other, right? And where there might be some form of basic democratic decision-making, then I think we would have gone a full step. Now on the question of why does effective governance matter, there's a whole debate in the literature, right? There's the Paris debate, we need democratic government or effective government. Now Paris says you need both, but effectiveness comes first, right? So the democratic government is something more for the long term, right? Now why does effective governance matter? Obviously, Kurt's presentation was all about why it matters, because when your house got flooded, right, and you might drown, and after the flooding there might be all kinds of diseases spreading. You might wonder what your government is doing in order to protect, right? But there is this very famous story in Bosnia that shows why a basic effective government matters. And that's a story that's linked to national citizen identification numbers, right? So these are numbers that every citizen gets when they're born. And the Constitution Court had an important decision where it said the Republika Srpska basically couldn't issue its own identification numbers because they would basically give children an ethnic profile. So as a result of that, basically, there were no national identification numbers issued to babies born in Bosnia anymore. Okay? Now you might say, well, that's not a big issue, who cares? Right? Well, the parent of the child that had a serious heart defect cared when they couldn't take their child out of Bosnia to have an operation to survive because they couldn't be issued with a passport, because in order to get a passport you need this identification. Right? So functioning government, I mean, if you go to Bosnia, so those of you who go there for the next few days, you might not really notice that there is dysfunctionality in the system. Right? If you are the parent of that child, you very much know. Right? If you are somebody who wants to open a small business and permanently when you apply for a license somebody says, oh, you need to pay me my bribe, otherwise I don't do that. Right? You notice. Right? If you have to do a massive amount of paperwork just to get a building permission, you notice. Right? I mean, states matter because states not only provide services to citizens, but states also allow citizens to regulate relations between each other. Right? If you have, as they had in the first post-war years in Bosnia, a police system that couldn't cross entity lines, right? And ordinary citizens basically were affected more and more by crime, because as a criminal you would just hop between the entities, and you couldn't be fought, right? You couldn't be prosecuted. Those things matter to citizens, right? I mean, as I said, I started doing some work in Syria. I've also done a bit of work lately in Myanmar. And when you go to countries like this, you learn to appreciate basic things that states provide. Electricity, for example. Right? If we were to do this conference in Myanmar, in the meantime, the electricity would have cut off 15 times. Right? If I go to Myanmar, the first thing you get is a health insurance that flies you out to Thailand if something happens to you. So you don't get treated in the country. Good news for me, because I can afford that. Bad news for Myanmar citizens. Right? So, I mean, state services, basic provisional services matter for citizens' life, and not only for individual citizens' life, but for collectives, how they organize their lives.
Thank you. Because I think we're running out of time. I think this was a really good answer. I would just focus on the first question, mistrust. Well, it seems to me what you call mistrust, we also call experience, right? So I guess it also living in Japan would be, as you see, radically different than living in Serbia, Bosnia, Ireland, right? So I think that our everyday social practices are dramatically different, and I'm guessing that also influence our positionality, right? So I'm guessing what you see as a kind of mistrust looming around our presentation, maybe this is just kind of shared experience that we had living in an area that is affected with such a problem, right? I'm not saying it's either good or bad, it's just kind of this from perspective of each of us having different kind of backgrounds and positionality. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all your questions. I'll attack them in reverse order. I mean, the simplest answer to why government functionality matters is people want it. People are pissed off because they're not getting it. And that has to be the basic navigational tool. If you're talking about an external actor perspective, do they need it? Then you get into the interests thereof, and effectively what we've had toward this region, and not just the Western Balkans, I would posit the whole Mediterranean littoral, is a containment policy, stability over alles. After that, we don't care. That may be great for us in the short term. I wouldn't posit it is in the long term, but that doesn't do Bosnians any good. So that would be from their perspective, which I identify with, though not being one. That would be the driver for me. To you, Hera, about enthusiastic disillusionment. Yeah, I usually say I'm a pissed off optimist or a frustrated optimist, particularly about Bosnia, but or maybe that's just a manifestation of a constant condition. I have confidence that things could be better, therefore I want them to be better, and damn it, let's blast what's in the way of them being better out of the way. And that the drivers for that have to be local. I agree with Soren about that. And that just to chuck in a point that you made earlier, that there are limits to what external actors can do, but there are also, if there's any country on planet Earth where external actors have greater leverage in the functioning governmental system of a country than Bosnia, I don't know where it is. And that, what would come with that is a sense of responsibility. One of the things that would be, safe and secure environment, yes, in a military sense, that has not been directly challenged, though I would disagree with. I think you have a more sanguine view of how much that could be upended. But also, after protests, particularly in 2014, safe and secure environment means, can my government repress me if I protest peacefully? And that, I think, is something that I would, if I were giving orders to the international community, I would say, yeah, we're not going to be on the side of police brutality, where unfortunately, I think the default setting is, we're for police brutality for civility. And that's, that's not something I'm down with. Finally, your question, sir, on the context, to elaborate, I'll do it very briefly. Impact on governance of the floods. It was a diagnostic tool. It showed everything. Everything was about control. Nothing was about serviceability. Bottom line, government is for government. And when we're talking about whether it functions, you have to ask for whom. Government in Bosnia functions perfectly for the prime beneficiaries of governance, which are the people in government in the public sector. The prime beneficiaries, who I would say anybody in a blackouty in Bosnia is a prime beneficiary of the government system. They're the enemy, for lack of a better term. There are people who live on crumbs below that level, but if you're in a blackouty, you're one of the bad guys, or their sons or their drivers. And so everybody saw that clearly, and that there's potential for forward movement, which I think is becoming more pronounced but has yet to manifest itself, is the differential between when I arrived in Bosnia in 2005, that's sort of the peak of parabola that Soren, I think, nailed well. We've been going downhill since 2006. There was a sense of optimism of continued forward movement, but, and then the presumption was the EU is going to solve this, we don't need any additional tools. Now, you have a sense among everybody, I lost the war. Those bastards in blackouts won the war, all of them. Mine, his, hers, I lost. I might have been complicit in my own undoing, but I lost. And that is potentially positive, but it has to actually be assembled and manifest and mobilized in a way. And it won't be institutional. I think the only driver for change in Bosnia is to be extra institutional. The most we external actors can do, but I'll sum it up here, is to hold the arm, limit the damage that the established powers that be can do to their citizens, so their citizens could force them against their will of change.
Thank you very much. We start at 4:30.